everyone, welcome back to Navajo Tea Time. This topic is gender bias, right?
Yeah, gender biases. We're going to be answering gender bias self-reflection questions.
Alright, so how was I expected to behave because of my gender?
Okay, yeah, so think about your childhood and, how are you expected to behave because of your gender?
As mentioned before, well, okay, so
let's assume no one's ever seen one of our videos.
They come on, they pay for this one video, they never include me.
They don't know us, they don't know nothing. Just kidding.
I guess I was expected to take care of my siblings because I was the oldest daughter. I remember this one time my dad expected me to know how to wrap presents. He asked me to, for Christmas, like, hey, wrap your brother's presents. And, one was a football, the other was a BB gun. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, I thought you were a girl and you knew how to wrap presents. I'm like, it's a football. And, yeah, and those were things from my childhood.
I think when I know this. When I think back on my childhood, I remember traveling with my aunt and uncle, and they always expected me to be presentable to the public. Like, a little girl in her pretty dresses, her hair had to be fixed perfectly, she had to be clean, she had to be quiet, you know what I mean, and well-behaved, because that's how they perceive girls to have to behave. And then with my parents, I felt like I was expected to, same thing, look after the kids, like my younger siblings, which I hated, which is why I never wanted kids. And then I think that I was also expected to not. I do think this has to do with my gender. I was expected to not really stand up for myself or fight, but I did. I would fight with my cousins. I would fight with the boys in the neighborhood. I was really rough and tumble because I didn't have an older brother, but it seemed like all the boys were having all the fun, and I wanted to engage and play. And at first they would be like, go away, you know what I mean? And I never listened because I've never listened outside. And so I would just kind of force my way in there, and I'd be like, I'm going to play too. And then I would be good at certain things, and they used to get mad. Like, I was fast. I was good at certain sports. I was really lucky too as a kid for some reason. Like, I would end up with everybody's marbles. You know what I mean? And they get pissed at me. So any kind of competitive kind of stuff, I used to like.
So you weren't expected to be competitive?
Yeah, I was expected to kind of just
to be meek and quiet and
well behaved,
not heard.
Yeah, I think that's how it was, but I just resisted it, and I got in trouble for it sometimes. But yeah, that's weird when I think about it.
Okay.
Oh, I think I was expected to play with dolls too at school. All the other girls used to play with dolls, and I hated playing with dolls. I never brought them to school. I used to just look at them like, you guys are freaking weird. I'm going to go play knotted over here. I'm going to go play basketball. You know what I mean? And I remember the girls used to be, looking at me weird or side-eyeing me, and they would kind of, spread rumors, like, Adrian likes to play with the boys. And I'm just like, you guys are stupid.
I think something that was really weird was, when I moved back from, because I spent, up until 8th grade, I lived off the reservation, either in Flagstaff or Phoenix. And then when I moved back, the girls didn't wear dresses. And so I was really odd when I wore a dress. And people were like, why are you dressed up? I'm like, because I like wearing dresses. That was it's a weird flip of it. It's you only wore dresses when there was a special occasion or when it was picture day. But when I was in Phoenix or Flagstaff, I wore dresses all the time because I liked wearing dresses.
Yeah.
And then the girls on the reservation were like, why are you wearing dresses? What's the special occasion? I'm like, because it was on. It was clean.
Yeah, I know. I used to wear dresses probably almost every day too when I was little. And then when I got to school, I stopped because, it wasn't the norm. A lot of girls wore just pants. So I was like, I guess I'll wear pants too. But also, I didn't really get to dress myself when I was younger. My parents, my aunts, they bought my clothes and did my hair. So all my pictures are hideous.
I know, my mom, she had this thing where, like, you curl the bangs and you fluff it up.
I have, like, the side ponytail. That was
You were an
me.
80s baby.
I was an 80s baby. Like, all my school pictures were like that.
Mine was, like, my bangs were, like, curled and teased.
Oh, God.
And
I know. I have some of those, too.
I had nightmares of, like, my mom burning my forehead.
Oh, no!
It's like
They were so rough.
She puts a comb right there, and I'm like, it's burning. It's hot. It's hot. It's like, don't move. You're going to burn yourself. I'm like, no, you're going to burn me. Stop it. Anyways, next question. How have my parents, family members, classmates, peers, and romantic interests influenced my beliefs about gender? Well, I guess that was the classmates of, like, you know, like, on the reservation, you only dress up when there's a reason to dress up. You don't wear dresses willy-nilly. It's really odd, but, like... So one thing my dad did is, like, my older brother, he was in the military and he was in the Marines, so he had tattoos because that's just the culture. And then when I got my tattoo, he was kind of disappointed in me, and it was, like, one of the only times he showed being disappointed in me, and so that made me feel really bad. But I don't think it's, like, it was a gender belief, but they were very less mad at my older brother for having tattoos than they were mad at me for having tattoos. Because, like, Navajos don't get tattoos. I'm like, well, Charles has tattoos. Junior has tattoos. Like, well, they're boys. I'm like, well, you said Navajos. You didn't say girls.
Right? I know. Yeah.
And, like, you're not even traditional. You go to church. What are you talking about?
Great point, Kelsey.
You know, it's like...
What about your romantic interests? Or, like...
My romantic interests? Well, I think...
Or partners.
Partners, interests. Influence. Well, I think with my husband, I've had a lot more freedom to just be who I am. I know, like, his Hopi side, there's a lot of, like, the women clean and cook and do a lot of the housework, and the men just go off to work. Just go off to work. They go work, you know, and it's kind of more norm where it's like a housewife, or she has, like, a part-time job, but her main job is to cook and clean and take care of the kids. So I'm kind of glad I'm with the one I chose because, like I've said it a million times, I'm not a housewife. I don't clean and I don't do the dishes. I can and I do cook for the household, but we've talked about this, like, you know, he doesn't mind doing the dishes, and because he really likes my cooking, and I told him I'm not gonna cook if I have to do the dishes afterwards. And my job, my part in the company's job, is I do a lot more work. And so he's taking on the house husband roles where, like, he'll take Frankie to school, and because of, like, my random OCD with Frankie doing her class projects perfectly, he helps her with the homework. Otherwise, I'd be the ones doing the homework for her. I caught that early on with the Head Start. I'm like, Gordon, you have to help her because I'm going to do it myself, and I'm going to be mad at her because she's supposed to learn how to draw a square, but I'm going to make her make a perfect square. So we've definitely worked together as, like, a unit instead of, like, you're the male, so you do this, you're the female, so you do this.
Yeah.
But we definitely get a lot of slack from my grandma.
Really?
Because she's like, when's your husband get a real job? When's he going to bring in real work? When's he going to do man's work?
Oh, my God.
So she says that all the time, and he just rolls his eyes and everything. And I'm like, Grandma, if Gordon had a real job, if we had real jobs where we didn't work for ourselves and had all this free time, who's going to take you to the hospital? Who's going to haul wood for you? Who's going to chop wood for you? Because we'd be at our real jobs and not being able to help you.
It's too bad that people don't consider entrepreneurship or owning your own business a real job. It's so unfortunate.
Or, like, because she calls, like, man's work, you know, like, being construction, doing, like, yard work, being out,
being
working,
outside,
using
right?
your muscles to do work instead of, like, he's a graphic designer, so he draws pictures on the computer.
I know, my husband's a professor, he's a writer, and that's not being outside or getting dirty either, but it's like, does that... By your grandma's definition, he wouldn't have a real job either.
Nope, he wouldn't be doing man's work.
He wouldn't be. Dang, check us out.
So I'm just like, whatever, Grandma. Take your medicine.
Oh, no.
I say that to her too. I say it to her face. I'm like, whatever, Grandma, it's okay. What about you? You know, parents, family members, peers, your significant other, past and present.
Mm-hmm. What I learned from my parents about gender is that women are wives, you know, and men who are husbands. Like, women are wives, supporters of their husband, caretakers of the home and children, and they also are in charge of their own careers, you know? So there's this balancing act that women have to partake in that I think can be really exhausting. But from what I learned from my mom, is that in everything you do, you start from the bottom and you work your way to the top. And you give it 100%. You don't just like, you know, because anytime you decide not to do your best at something, it's going to suffer, right? Whether it's your marriage, your children, or your career. And so having to maintain that balancing act, that's what I learned about, like, female, or, like, gender roles, I guess. With my, like, for my father, it's like men are masculine, men are the providers.
So some weird, like, I guess association that I developed about gender has this weird, like, music genre connection for me, just because of, like, how I experienced people in the world. And that was, guys listen to metal music and girls listen to, like, the alternative punk music. So it was really, and that was just, like, it was a deep-seated it was just, like, a deep-seated, like, fact in my mind was, like, guys listen to metal and girls listen to, like, punk alt music. Because that's just been my experience growing up. And, like, so, like, my brother, my dad, my uncles, they all listen to, like, heavy metal, hair metal. And, like, all my friends who are girls listen to, like, the same, like, alt music, pop punk, you know, music, like, and that was just my experience with it. And then when it took me all the way to film school, where, like, one of the other guys in my film class, he's like, oh yeah, I like Blink-182, and I like this band, and I like that band. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. I was like, he's like, why? I'm like, I don't know. There's just something in my head that, like, this was girly music.
What did he say?
He's like, what? Why? I'm like, all the guys I know listen to metal. It's never been anything else.
He's probably like, oh, right in the masculinity.
Well, he was, when I went to film school, that was, like, my last year. I was 21, and he started his career, or his, like, education at film school. So he was, like, 18. So he saw me more of, like, an older sister mom type. Yeah. Of the group. But I was like, it's just weird to know that you like this music, because it's always been, like, for me, it's always been girly. Yeah. Because I was a girl who listened to it. So it was girly music. I don't know. That was one weird, like, belief that, like, was deep-seated into me all the way until I was, like, 21. Because no one ever challenged it, because I didn't express it. But, like, just the things I saw around me and the people I hung out with, guys were more metal-based. Or, like, maybe even I was, like, maybe blending the two, where, like, even, like, the softer rock music, the pop rock music was more girly, like, and even if it was, like, harder punk metal music, still the guys listened to it more, but, like, I don't know.
That's funny. I was gonna say that makes sense, but it doesn't.
It's just, like, it's just been my life experience.
Well, for me, the way I think that parents, family members, classmates, peers, and romantic interests have influenced my beliefs about gender, it's always been, like, females are feminine and males are masculine. You know what I mean? That was the norm. And, like, I saw that with my parents, where, you know, I come from a family where my parents remained married throughout my childhood. And so I always saw them working together. And my mom was, you know, she embodied femininity, you know, to me. And the way she expressed herself and the way she carried herself was very feminine. and my dad very masculine. You know, they never switched, or you know what I mean. It was always very. And then like with my family members, pretty similar as well. Except for one exception, one of my uncles is gay, and so he's more feminine. But not even in a hyper feminine way. It's just his sexual preference. Sometimes he can be sassy, but for the most part, he really does value his ability to be a man, and he really does enjoy the privilege that his not his gender, but his
yeah, it's his gender.
What it affords him. You know what I mean? And so, but that's kind of been the balance, or that's what I've seen as the norm. And so
I think there's definitely a difference between like gender identity and sexual preference.
There is.
Obviously, they go hand in hand sometimes, but I feel like one doesn't automatically influence
it's like
the other.
Sex, gender, and then sexual preference. They're all different and separate. And so, and sometimes they're fluid. But in my family, like, the fluidity wasn't there. You know what I mean? It was very, like, masculine, male, feminine, female. That was the norm. And so that's what influenced my beliefs about gender. And then it was reinforced by the church, and it was reinforced by the environment of our school. Like, there weren't a bunch of kids that were out, you know what I mean, in my school. That wasn't, like, how it is now, where everyone's coming out, and it's like, yeah, we know, you know what I mean? Like, it's obvious. But, like, that wasn't the norm when I was growing up, you know what I mean? And then same thing, like, so when it came to romantic interest, though, that is where I learned a lot about the fluidity of gender. Because it wasn't until I engaged in romantic relationships with men that I saw the softer side of them, the more feminine side of them, the more vulnerable side of them. And I learned how to care for that and value that and protect it. And I wouldn't have seen that because I think men often perform masculinity out in the public, and they don't really reveal their true selves until you're with them in private, because they feel like that's a safe space for them to be themselves, at least with me. And so that's when I learned about the fragility of these performances we put on for the public. So that's what informed me about my ideas about gender. So if you think about it, if you look at the timeline, for the majority, or at least for a good portion of my life, it was very, like, the gender binary was the norm. And I didn't really see any difference in that until I got older. At least old enough to have a romantic relationship. Yeah.
Well, like, I don't know, like, for me, it was never that way. There was, like, because I had older cousins who, like, they're female, but they, like, dress very masculine. And then even one of my aunts, who's, like, 13 years older than me, so she's still pretty young when I was growing up, is like, there's a moment in time where she identified as a lesbian, but now she's just kind of bi because she likes both, obviously. But, like, so, like, and even with, like, my mom growing up, they were treated as sons. They were expected to do, like, male work, masculine male work all the time, because there was no boys to take over that role. And, you know, there's like, girl do this, boy do that. Sometimes, like when I was growing up, there was definitely, this guy's a little femme, this girl's a little butch, you know, and, like, there was never any, like, separation for me.
Really? Yeah, see, in my family, all the girls, so I have two sisters, so there's 3 girls in our family, and then there's my brother. My sisters are all, like, feminine females. My brother's hyper masculine. So it was very much the norm, you know what I mean? And there was, like, my brother was never this soft, he never really showed that side of him, that, like, like, the feminine side of him. He never really nurtured it, you know what I mean? He was always hyper masculine, always, like, exerting his authority wherever he, even as a little boy, you know what I mean? He was a rough and tumble kind of boy, get in trouble. And I think, like, when it comes to the dynamics in parenthood, I feel like my parents let him get away with a lot more than they let us get away with. We were very, like, confined and very restricted, whereas he had a lot more freedom. And I think that also informed my beliefs about gender. Yeah.
All right, so the next question, how do I come to define my gender identity? Do I remember deciding what gender I related to the most? No, I don't remember deciding what gender I related to the most. it was never a question for me. You know, I think one time, like I get mad about, like, why my brothers can do things and why I couldn't do things.
Yeah.
Like, it was really hot in the summer, so my brothers were allowed to run around shirtless in their little shorts. I'm like, I want to take my shirt off too. It's hot. I don't do well in the sun. You know, like, this is like when we were little, like 5, 6, 3 years old.
Yeah.
And my dad's like, no, you can't run around with your shirt off. I'm like, why? They're doing it. He's like, well, because they're boys. I'm like,
yeah.
So? He's like, you have boobs. I'm like, their boobs are the same size as mine. I'm like a 5-year-old. I want to run. You know?
Yes.
But, like, because, so I was always asking, like, why can they do it but I can't? So that's, like, it's always been that question to me. But I've always known I was a girl. Like, some people probably find this shocking to know about the older person in me. But, like, I've always wanted to be a mom. Whether I've always wanted to be a wife is a completely different story, but I've always wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to have a daughter and a baby, you know, and it wasn't like someone said, you have to be a mom, you have to be a wife. It's like, it was always something I wanted to do. I was always wanted to be a parent. And so, like, I think, so I've never questioned my gender, you know. I've never been like, why is my body shaped this way? Why are these things this way? It's just been like, how come that boy gets to do something but I don't get to do something as a girl?
Like, it's more like the privilege of it, right?
Yeah, it's like, why are boys allowed to hit people but girls aren't allowed to hit people?
I hit people.
I hit people too, but it's like, you're a girl, you shouldn't hit. It's like, why? Boys are allowed to hit. So it wasn't like, I always argued against the gender biases of, like, what genders are allowed to do and supposed to do, but I've never been like, but I'm a boy, I should be allowed to do that. I've been like, I'm a girl, I should be allowed to do anything I want.
Exactly. I know, me too. I feel like I always knew my gender identity. I always knew that I was a girl, a woman. I never questioned it. I never wanted to be anything else, but I feel like I'm also more of a masculine female in the way I think and the way I perform, because, and I take pride in that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not the kind of person that, like, if you look at the definition of what femininity is, those are not, I don't really feel like that defines me as a person. I feel like I perform femininity, but it's a performance, and it's because what it does is it affords me certain privileges in the world. I know that power dynamic, and I utilize it and manipulate it to my own benefit.
I know
it's calculated, right?
About, like, the performative, because, like, I remember this one time my dad was in the hospital, and I needed to get his records, but he didn't have a power of attorney. But because I was the oldest daughter, everyone expected me to do everything. So I went to the counter to the lady, and it's just full crocodile tears. My voice was breaking and everything. I was just like, my dad's in a coma, and I need this information. Can you please just give it to me? And they're just like, oh, no, okay. What's his name? We'll look it up right now. And my mom gets mad at me when I tell her I do stuff like that.
Oh, my gosh.
Because it's obviously not a genuine emotion. I'm doing it to get something in return. She's like, why are you being weak like that? I'm like, because it's easier than arguing. Legally, they probably shouldn't have given me the information, so I'll just put on crocodile tears. No one wants to deal with a crying female, I'll tell you that.
That's probably true. Well, that's not what I meant. But what I meant is, like, hair, makeup, manicures, pedicures, beauty, right? The beauty standard of femininity. That's what I utilize to my own benefit. Why? Because it's disarming. People will perceive you a certain way, and they will react to you a certain way. And it's kind of like a, it's almost like a bait and switch. They don't expect me to be as aggressive or as knowledgeable as I am. And I love that because it's unassuming. And so in business and in other arenas, professionally, I've utilized it to my own benefit. I also really love that my name is gender neutral. People oftentimes think that I'm a man, and they interact with me like I'm a man, and I love it. But then they freak out when we get on the phone, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're a woman." I'm like, "Yes," and they're like, "How old are you?" And I'm just like, "That doesn't matter." You know what I mean? And it's I've used it to my benefit. I've learned how it works, and I do that. So I think but I've always known I was a woman, a girl. And And I've never questioned it either. But but the gender norm is what I play with, and I do it for fun.
I pretend to be helpless just because it's easier than, like, explaining. And I know some people are like, why would you do that? It's like, because it's fastest, it's easy, I get what I want done faster. And
I use it when I need people to do work for me, like move heavy objects and stuff. Oftentimes I'll intentionally wear heels when I know it's going to be a heavy lifting day at work, and I can get people to do the work for me. And it's just because I'm like, I'm not getting paid to do this, you are, and I'll assign it to somebody. And I know that I don't need to do that. I mean, physically, I know that I could carry the stuff. I know I'm strong. Sometimes I just don't want to do it, though. And I'm like, well, if I can get out of this, I will. And I'll use, my femininity to get out of it by wearing a skirt and heels that day. Mm-hmm. And it's very calculated. I don't just, like, even now I'm not wearing a skirt and heels because I'm not doing any heavy lifting. But you know what I mean? Like, and I know I'm not the only one that does that.
Mm-hmm. All right, everyone, thank you for watching. This will be part 1 of 4. This was originally a hot tea subject. That's why this episode took a while to edit. I had to make sure the tea wasn't too hot. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, our channel goal is to get to 1,000 subs by the end of the year. Thanks. I'll go on it.
Just smashed it into his face, yeah.
Not a very Navajo friendly. It's like a weird label you're putting on yourself.
They protect us, they guide us. And my father, he worked in law enforcement, so he was.
You witnessed police pulling over cars.
If you got to slap a senator, you slap a senator. Incorporating language and cultural aspects into. Who's your celebrity crush?
Pass.
It's at a point where you're just like, what am I doing?